Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the ReadyTech Remote Control Employment Services series. For those of you who are first-time attendees, my name is James Horn. I'm the Commercial Director at ReadyTech. And with me is Ben Conlon. We'll cover that in a second. So, quick introduction to today's session, and those of you who've registered today would be already understanding that today is all about discussing and going through some of the things and some of the skills and some of the tools that are available to help you continue to be a great case manager even when you're remote. Now, due to the rapidly changing environment and circumstances, when we originally conceived this concept, we're still very much in 100% lockdown, and I don't think there was any sort of clear vision on or timeframes on when we would be returning to normal. I know that there's still some ambiguity about when that might be, but as the states continue to slowly open up and the return to work plans are being discussed, I'm sure, amongst all of your organisations, we still think today is going to be really, really valuable and important, because I think it'll take time to return to a completely office-based work environment, if ever again. So the idea of working remotely is going to be really, really important topic, and something that we'll have to continue to work on and improve over the next 3, 6, 12 months. So today I am joined by a professional remote worker in Ben Conlon. Morning, Ben.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. And Ben is going to actually explore a few things with us today. So first, we're going to hear from Ben's personal perspective on what it actually looks like to work remotely. Ben's been working remotely with us for the entirety of your tenure at JobReady, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
4 years. You've picked up some tricks and tips on how to best execute that. Then we'll also be exploring some of the tools and the platforms and products that we've got and that we've seen that can help you be a really effective case manager and EC now and moving forward. Just some general housekeeping. You will notice that either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on where your sort of Zoom bar is, there is a Q&A section. As we work through today's session, I'll be monitoring Q&A. So if there's a really great question that's relevant to that particular screen or slide we're on, we'll tackle it there and then. And if there's obviously time allocated at the end of today's presentation, where we'll pick up those questions that we didn't get to as part of the presentation. Today's is more about interactive sessions. So there is a deck that we will share, but I think it's really important for you to take some notes away from today. But we will be sharing the recording and the deck probably in tomorrow's sort of wash up and after it's been through the edit room. We will then also publish on the ReadyTech Remote Control Employment website. So the details for that site are on the final slide. So, Ben, how are you, firstly?
I'm fantastic, James. Loving it, as always.
So, what we wanted to do today was explore some, really key agenda items that we feel, and this has been in collaboration and conjunction with a lot of our customers and the broader market. A lot of those key areas that we think that need discussion. So today's agenda is very much about how can we bring the everyday attitude and everyday process that you're typically used to working in your offices. How can we bring some of that philosophy and practical advice into a remote working environment? So Ben, you're going to take us through some of these points in detail, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just a quick run through of the agenda before we dive into the detail. So clear the decks. I think most offices and organisations I've worked with or worked for A clear desk policy is one of the things that is typically been rolled out, particularly as we've gone to hot desking and centralized working stations. It's really important that we bring that same attitude to a remote workspace and how we actually prepare ourselves for each workday. Owning the systems. So now more than ever, it's important that you've got a really good grasp and really good management over the systems that you're using, whether they be a job ready system or email or spreadsheets or an internal system that has been implemented. It's really important that you understand how best to use those platforms and leverage them to get them to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Ben's going to talk through some of those pieces. Knowing your caseload, there's some really interesting stuff around data management and personalization in today's session. Knowing your opportunities. So again, really understanding how to use the systems that are available to you to really maximize the amount of engagement and output and cut through that you're getting when you don't have the opportunities to have those face-to-face conversations and engagement sessions with either your job seekers or your participants. Always being available. This is a contentious one. I think we're all really starting to get to know products like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype. And there's a pressure or certainly an observation of mine is that these guerrilla meetings seem to appear a lot more frequently than they used to. So there's certain expectations from the organisation that you are probably more available than you were before we went into a remote workforce. So we want to just explore some of the communication tools that you can use to either automate some of that communication so you are appearing to be available, and again, getting the technology in those systems to work for you. Eyes on the prize. There are many more distractions for us when we're working from home. The reason I'm sat outside this morning is because my 6-month-old is not feeling the best and she's been quite vocal inside. So how do we actually maintain focus and really just hone in on what the priorities and those activities that are of really high value? How do we make sure that we stay focused on those? And then ultimately, taking a step back and really understanding that we are in this together, and this has been a global impact pandemic, and it will certainly leave a lasting impact. So we need to make sure that we're able to stay in communication and connect with one another. And again, how some of the tools that, particularly Ben has implemented over his sort of 3 or 4 years of working remotely, what he's seen work in the past. So, Ben.
Yep. Okay.
I'm going to throw over to you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Just before I do share my screen, a couple of comments. Firstly, thank you for the work that you do. Difficult and important work, getting opportunities for disadvantaged people, helping them navigate through the system, becoming more and more important as we move from the initial impact of this situation into the economic impact of it. So really important and difficult work that you're doing. So I'd like to thank you for doing that work. Another comment I'd like to make around the point of clear the decks. So clear the decks is really about establishing your virtual workspace. As I said, I've worked completely remotely with ReadyTech for the last 4 years, but I can't remember the last time I actually had a desk. Okay, so it's probably about, I don't know, something like 10 years since I had a desk. So I've spent the majority of my time working from home or from various places. Really important that you clear the decks. And by clear the decks, I mean clear the decks from a psychological point of view as much as anything else. Darren Coppin from Escher House has got a lot to say around psychological states and all the rest of it. And I'd recommend and commend his information. From my perspective, I've got a couple of rituals that I do in order to clear the decks. So one of the things that I used to do was I'm very lucky in that I live about 1 kilometre from the school. So I would do the school drop. What that did would allow me to get out the door, to leave, and then when I return, I come in through the back door and then go to my desk. Okay. The other things that I do is I don't know if you can see I'm wearing the ReadyTech t-shirt here. So I tend to wear a uniform or have a specific set of clothes that I wear. I wear shoes. I don't wear slippers. You know, all of those sorts of things. Get myself into the psychological aspect for work, and it's really important. I can't stress enough how you need to make that separation from a psychological point of view, a separation between the private and the work state. And from a tech perspective, it's really, really important that you separate your virtual workspace from your private tech space. Okay. And to that end, that's simple and obvious things like turn off notifications, get rid of your social media, remove those distractions, have a distinct, clear virtual workspace that you operate out of. Now, they may sound like statements of the bleeding obvious, and to a certain extent they are, but I really can't stress how important they are and how easy it is to step back from that. So I'm just going to share a screen with you guys. If you just bear with me for a moment. Okay, so you should be able to see a screen that says, hello, Ben Connellan. James, could you put a thumb up for me if that's the case? Thank you. Right, so this is the dashboard known and loved by Job Ready Live customers throughout the country. There's a couple of things here. What we're talking about now is we're talking about the own your systems section. So what we mean here is that we need to make sure that the systems we're operating with are doing the heavy lifting for us. Now, some of you may have attended the Job Ready Live Job Seeker Portal presentation that I did a couple of weeks ago. And that is a really good example of a system that does some heavy lifting for you, particularly if you're working from a remote point of view. Now, I just need to move a few things here. Okay, so we can see over here in terms of the dashboard, right? So this is the splash screen that people get to. From the perspective of the Job Seeker portal, we can see here that we've got a series of reminders. They're all from our very good friend, Mavis Bramston. Now, Mavis is a job seeker who has the Job Seeker portal that I took through yesterday. But what we see here is a bunch of information that Mavis is uploading. So she's uploaded a resume, she's uploaded a new document, she's uploaded. So here we can see this is the Job Seeker portal, which is a tool. It's an integration tool or a communication tool that is doing some heavy lifting for us in that it is allowing people to interact with us online, remotely, in their own time. Really brilliant from a perspective of that interaction. And for somebody that's working remotely, what this does is it establishes that communication mechanism where you don't need to be in front of that person. Okay, so there's a couple of other things that you need to do in terms of owning your systems. This is examples from the system that I know best, which is Job Ready Live, but there are a couple of things that you need to do. The key point is about engagement, okay? So engaging, it's about information, it's about communication, it's about collaboration. So if we have a look here at owning your system, the first thing you need to do is look at your dashboard. Job Ready Live dashboard will give you the things that you need to do today. So this will give you appointments, reminders, expenses, in this case, claims submitted to the central claims unit and so on. This is a really powerful way of you establishing the work and being reminded of the work that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. But if we move on from that, we've also got an alerting system. Now, what the alerting system does is it reminds you of mission critical functions, okay? So what it does is it goes through a whole bunch of information for you and alerts you to those mission critical functions. In a lot of ways, it's exception reporting, so no job plan, no flexible ongoing support, no PPS for 20 days. So this is your system doing the heavy lifting for you by reminding you at what you need to do on a day, but also, and much more importantly, reminding you what you're missing, okay? So alerting you to those mission critical things.
I think just an important piece to remember there is the curation or the personalization of that information. I think one of the things when talking about owning your systems, the power in that is tailoring it so that the information that you've been presented with is yours, you know, as opposed to a blanket wave of information that you need to sift through and work out where to prioritize and what is it that you're actually responsible for. And that goes for systems that, you know, and Ben's showcasing, you know, some of the stuff that he's really using a lot right now. This goes to other platforms or systems that you are potentially using right now, whether it be email or CRMs or other systems. It's really important that you spend the time to actually construct the system in a way that it's giving you the information that you need in the time frame that you need it.
Thank you, James. So the reason that we've got, and again, these are alerts that are specific to my caseload or to whoever the user's caseload is. We can obviously report on these alerts at any level, but what we're talking about now is an individual case manager knowing their systems and getting their systems to do the heavy lifting for them. The next point really here is about knowing your caseload. Now, caseload is a really important and obvious thing that you need to know, but it's surprising how little some case managers do know. So if we look at this alerts, one of the things that we see when we click on these alerts, all right, is all of these alerts are basically index filters, okay? So they're index filters that will separate and run through information for you and establish a mechanism to filter your caseload. I'll go into the job seekers. So in Job Ready, there are a whole bunch of filters around your job seeker caseload, okay? So it's really important that you understand how you can operate and work within these filters. So you can filter to your caseload, establish a set of searches, establish a set of data sets. This is an example where I'm going program DES, employment assistance, EA, and a given site. You can apply those searches and save those searches, and then you can get back to those saved searches. But importantly, you can also bulk action against those. So again, this is really important in terms of knowing your caseload and having the communication and engagement tool that you can create notes, send SMSs and send emails against every one of those job seekers, or you can click into the individual job seeker and action information from there. So
just on that, Ben,
yeah,
those say searches and those filters that you're talking about,
yep,
those sorts of things controllable and configurable by you, or is that something that needs to be
oh no, absolutely. This job seeker, the job seeker index. Okay, so the job seeker index, we give you complete control. You can set up whatever searches, filters, save those searches in any way that you so desire. What this does is it allows you to segregate the information against any searchable or filterable field. So you can go time in program, disability type, allowance rate, all of those things. And by going through this information, that gives you that sort of detailed, in a lot of ways, it's a 3D view of your caseload. But more importantly, it gives you the mechanism to engage with that caseload because you know the detail of the information that's sitting in the system.
Yeah, I think it's important that I suppose the agenda item that we wanted to talk about here is owning the system, and that comes with it some responsibility to spend time constructing it in a way and configuring it in a way that is going to really help you improve not just the utilization of it, but how you are then able to service caseload, because you're a lot more efficient and a lot more effective in the use of technology.
So a tip that I would give to those those live customers or live users that are on this meeting is use the alerts. So if you use the alerts and drop into the alerts, that'll give you a filter. Okay, so this is a job seeker filter. So this gives you an idea and an example of some of the things that you can do. So here we're seeing from the job plan status alert, we're seeing a way to structure a data set. So I often use these as templates, if you like, or as a starting point in order to structure a filter set that's going to get me to the information that I need that's relevant to me. Yeah. So if we operate out of this, we can see that we can get any job plan status, we can get any, any individual or combination of status. And there are, if you go back here, we can see that we can do date ranges. If you go back to your filters, we can then see that there's a whole bunch of date ranges that you can do within all of these filters, which is really useful as a mechanism to understand, if you like, the architecture of the filtering system within the index. Running from the alerts is a really great tool. It's a great way to do it. It's a great way to understand how that tool works.
Just a reminder, because again, that's really specific to the way that Jobbery Live's working. But
yep,
feel free to throw any questions or comments in the Q&A section about other types of systems that you're using that allow you to do, a much more efficient way to engage with your caseload. And any questions you've got about other types of sort of data management, data control that you're interested in learning more about.
Yeah, please do. Okay, so this is what I've been speaking about here is own your systems and know your caseload. So we're talking about the tools in terms of filters, reminders, the dashboard, the alerts. These are the sorts of things that are going to give you that 3D view of your caseload, that knowledge and depth of your caseload, which then means that your engagement with those people when you're speaking to them, either in post-placement support, either in an appointment or virtual appointment, that means that you've got that depth of information to have a meaningful engagement with that individual, okay? So moving on from that, the next thing you need to know is to know your opportunities. So it's really important, and I've got a better environment than this one. So if you just bear with me, I'll swap my environment just so that you can see an employer environment. Now this is the employer index, okay? So this is about you knowing your opportunities. Now in Jobbery Live, all your employers obviously sit within the system. There's a couple of things that we've done in Live, and this is about that engagement piece with the employer, and it's about knowing where the employer is sitting. So there's some really cool things that we've got in here from the perspective of information that we served really quickly and really obviously around employers. A lot of people in employment services don't necessarily think of themselves as salespeople, which is fair enough, okay, because we're here about working with job seekers, but there are things that we need to do that are about employer engagement. A lot of organisations have large employer engagement teams as well. Now, there's a few things that you need to know immediately about your employer. So this is straight into the employer index, and there are a bunch of filters that we can do here in the same way as we do with the job seeker caseload. So you can filter these by site, status, creation date, trading name, region, ANZIC code, all of those things. But the other thing, and probably the most used thing in here, is filtering by occupation for purposes of reverse marketing. Now, in order to reverse market effectively, you really need to know your employer base. And there's some things, not only do you need to know about what the employer is doing, but you need to know about your own interactions with the employer. So what we've got here is I've filtered this to accountants. So this is results against accountants. We've got a traffic light system here. What the traffic light system does is tell you about this employer immediately from your list. So we can see this employer's account managed, but hasn't been contacted in the last 30 days, right? So in that case, depending on what your workflow is, you might say, okay, let's have a look at this employer, or do I need to talk to Albert before I call the employer? Here we can see the employer's account managed and has been contacted in the last 30 days, in which case you would definitely want to talk to Emerson before you spoke to that employer. And down here we can see here's an employer that's not account managed and hasn't been contacted in the last 5 days, in which case we'd say that that employer is basically fair game, okay? So immediately you've got some information around the employer, around your interaction with the employer, which will tell you whether that person is a good prospect. So here we go, we'll have a look at this employer. Account managed, hasn't been contacted in the last 30 days, is it? Yeah, so I'm going to go into that employer. Now, oh, wants me to log in again. That's okay.
Just while we wait for that, what's sort of the top 3, I suppose, elements of this particular area that makes for you know, a better result or a better outcome as a case manager? What sort of 3 big benefits am I getting from this type of use of the system?
The benefits you're getting is that you know about and you can track the interaction with your employer. So that's the first thing. You've got a deeper knowledge of the employer. The other thing that I'm going to get to here is, particularly for this employer, you can identify using our system, because we put this ribbon along the top here, you can identify your key accounts, right? So you can identify this is an employer that's got claims due in the next 7 months, they've got placements and vacancies this contract. So this is a key employer. So that's the second thing you're doing. You know what the interaction is, you know who your key employer is. The third thing that you're getting from this really in terms of is around the key information. So the key information that you've got in terms of the understanding of where the employer is, all available in front of you. So you can see vacancy occupations, you can see placement occupations against this employer. So you've got a depth of knowledge of the employer, and you can obviously reverse market direct from the employer. If you do that, that'll drop the note against the job seeker's file. If you reverse market a job seeker from an employer or an employer from a job seeker, each party gets that note dropped against them. So here we can see all the history. So I suppose, James, in answer to your question, it's about that depth and sophistication of your knowledge of the employer and where they sit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, just a reminder, any questions about that, throw them in the Q&A. I think it's important to just continue to reiterate the theme of today, which is, you know, how is this actually improving, and not just this, but this idea of centralizing some of this key activity and bringing to the surface a lot of the activity that you would maybe have been discussed outside of systems at the moment, either in the corridors or whatever. I know that we've got another session on that in the next few weeks, but it's really important to see how, you know, one of the challenges with working remote is that isolation and that feeling of disconnect. So from what I can see, this is really breaking down those barriers in terms of making all of this information available to both the case manager and their colleagues, right?
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing worse than calling an employer where your colleague has just called them in the last half hour of the last day of the last week, right? Now, when you're in an office and you're physically present with people, you can avoid that sort of thing to a degree. But where you're working remotely and you don't have those kind of, informal interactions, look, I want to call this employer if you had any luck with them. What's the contact there like? When's the best time to call? All those sorts of conversations. Then it's really important that you've got the capacity to drill down into that information, into that contact information.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so where we are now is we're knowing our opportunities, and I'm just keeping an eye on time here at 10:30. So by my reckoning, we've got about another 10 minutes. Is that right, James?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so knowing your opportunities. So we've spoken about employers where the opportunities lie. We also you need to know your opportunities in terms of the vacancies that you have. Okay, so again, you can filter your vacancies. You can understand all the vacancies that exist in the system. You can refer people. Okay, you can refer people through the jobs board. Right, so this is a mechanism that you can use to refer your clients. That's keeping all the information internal. Okay, so everything all recommendations, all the information off these for these vacancies and for the referrals comes internal, single source of truth. So the most common thing that I hear from case managers, I can't get the business development people to refer people to my jobs, right? The most, to refer my people to the jobs rather, to refer my caseload. And from business development people, the most common thing is I can't get any referrals for the jobs that I'm listing, okay? Both of those things can't be true, right? So what we've got here is this jobs board. So what the jobs board does is it makes that an internal communication, keeps all the communication in one place. There's no sending round of emails, hey, I've got this job. There's no, sticky notes. There's no post-it notes. There's no, hey, Tom, have you got a referral? What's your best top 10? All of the jobs that are available sit on your jobs board for you to make those recommendations and referrals to. So once you've made the referrals to them, to those jobs, if I just bear with me while I go back a couple of screens. Once you've made that those recommendations to the jobs, then we see this information. And also importantly, people can recommend themselves to their jobs through the job seeker portal. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do as the person that's listed that vacancy. You can take an action on that. You can make a comment on that. That's their comment. You can make a result on that. You can accept or not accept that. You can put a rejection reason if there is one, and you can save that result and send that back. What that then does is gives you this internal communication so that everybody knows what's going on. If we go back to the dashboard that we see for the individual, you can see that is the placements that need attention. So this is about knowing your opportunities. These are opportunities for placements. You've got your reminders here that Mavis has applied for the job. She's uploaded the resume, and you've got, this is where your claims and placements have been submitted to the central claims unit. So we need to make the distinction between opportunity for a vacancy, okay, and opportunity to claim an outcome. So this is why we've got placements that need attention, claims submitted to the central claims unit.
Just on that, because I think it's a good point, and confession for me as well. I have a tendency to dip in and out of using different systems for the same purposes. I'm guilty of carrying a pen and paper because I really like writing notes during meetings. But then a month later, I'll start taking notes in a digital format, and then I'll dip out of that. So one of the things that's really important to note in this, and it's a lot probably more prevalent or relevant in this situation with our remote working scenario, is the discipline around completing the same activity or the same behavior through the same channel. So, what would typically be done in multiple threads. So as you talked about, Ben, if I'm referring someone or I'm managing a vacancy, I might receive referrals through different channels. It might be email, it might be an instant message, it might be a text message, it might be a system like this one. And what that actually does is causes a break in the chain. And it actually means that you've got to go and at some point bring all that information together. So one of the things that's really important is that you land on a behavior or a system, and this goes back to owning your systems, and you stick to that. And that requires discipline, and that requires, in some cases, buy-in from those people around you. So it's important to open up that conversation with your colleagues and your peers about establishing what agreement or what tool or platform you're going to use to complete these tasks from now on, so that you can start to trust that the information, the data, and the system that you're using is going to be used by everybody. Until that buy-in sort of happens, it starts to lose some of that value proposition. So that's a conversation as well that we really encourage you to go and have internally. We've had that at ReadyTech and JobReady with systems over the years. We use products like Slack and Zoom, and they are standard communication platforms that we use now. But during that initial adoption period, people were less willing to make those behavior changes and start to use the systems that we're trying to roll out. But, you know, after a brief settling in period, you know, you start to really see the value of having that one single platform to do those agreed tasks. And that's when you can start to really see the value.
Thanks for that, James. So yeah, that's about knowing your opportunities. The next sort of section here, and I'm aware of time here. So the next section is about to always be available. Now, again, this is somewhat contentious in that, you know, we've lost our weekends, we've lost our after work. Could that be the case? Maybe. But from the context of the system that I can show you, it's in terms of always being available, it's really about keeping on top of your schedules, right? It's about keeping on top of your reminders, and it's about keeping on top, particularly in terms of post-placement support, where we go to the next section, which is about eyes on the prize. But what I'll do here is I'll just take you through the post-placement support settings out of the admin function in Job Ready Live. So once a placement drops into the system will default to a support frequency, okay? So it will default to support settings, which will remind that individual or remind the person who's managing that placement or that job seeker to make those calls, okay? So those reminders will come up and those actions will come up. Interestingly, you need to set a successful support. You need to say that the support thing was successful and it will default, okay? So you can't just say that you've made the call. You've got to make a call on whether it's successful. And if it's unsuccessful, that is, you didn't talk to anybody, then that will set the days until your next contact. But we can see here that there's a whole bunch of different types of support frequency that we can operate with, okay? So Indigenous and against streams. We also require support forms. So once a support contact has been done, then the support form will drop in, which will require that information that person needs to fill out, information around compliance, around the conversations they need to talk about, around wage histories, around requirements to grab documentary evidence. What this does is this is relevant to the point that James was making earlier in terms of the way that you establish your workflows and your processes, that you've got consistent processes that you build into the system and build that workflow into the way that you operate in terms of being available and making your communications. Now, we're at 10:39. My cutoff time is 10:40, so eyes on the prize. I'll just take you back to the dashboard. Now, the eyes on the prize need to be about placements. They need to be about outcomes. They need to be about claims. They need to be about what you need to do to get that result for your job seeker. That's why on this system, we always have the placements that need attention right in your face, right on the dashboard. We also have the claims and the information that you need, additional information that is required, that is submitted to the central claims unit. So I don't have time today to go through the central claims unit functionality, and I don't have time to go through the detail on the placement, but the advice that I could give is always keep those eyes on the prize. Always understand that we're here to get people into work. The thing that I say, I used to say in my days as an employment services manager, is it doesn't say resume archiving facility out the front. It says employment service. So we're here to get people employed. And I'll take you through that, and I'll take you through the detail on how the system will help you keep your eyes on the prize next week. Thanks for that, guys.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Ben. So we've got about 7 minutes for any questions. Just a couple of questions from me, Ben.
Yep.
When you, I think a few people on today's session may be working remotely for the first time.
Yep.
What was some of the things that you found difficult when you first transitioned to remote working that might be relevant?
I think that one of the things I found difficult was that separation of the private and the workspace. I think, and I don't just mean in terms of physical space, I mean in terms of mental space. It took me a while to realise that I needed to leave the house. Do you know what I mean? To actually physically leave the house in the morning and come back. The other thing that was difficult and that is important is about taking your breaks, and particularly at the moment, because it's, you know, everybody's kind of stuck a bit. Make sure you take your breaks. Make sure you get out the door if you can. Make sure that you get out about, go for a walk at lunchtime. Take lunch, right? All of us, you know, we've all got crazy workloads at the moment. Some are still working out of hours, but make sure you take lunch. Make sure you've got that structure. I actually sometimes make myself lunch. You know what I mean? So I'll actually go and sit and open a lunchbox and have a sandwich, which sounds strange, right? But it's about that psychological or mental state separation between the workspace and the private space.
Yeah, and you can bring it back to today's theme. You know, being a great case manager, EC, it is really important that you try and apply some of the habits and the rituals that you have coming into this. How do you actually make sure that you keep some of that rhythm and cadence and consistency to make
That's
sure
right.
your output is just as high?
And the core of the job isn't actually that different. Like the core things, I mean, and to be a great case manager, you need to know your caseload, you need to know your opportunities, you need to keep your eyes on the prize, you need to be focused on outcome. That doesn't change. The way that you approach that does change.
Yeah, I think some of the conversations I've had have been around, you know, losing sort of 10% of the detail or the information that you would naturally absorb through, you know, a shared working space.
Yep.
Sidebar conversation, or you know, you catch someone in the kitchen or on the way out to lunch or whatever. You pick up information that's relevant to your role.
Yep.
They're usually the really valuable pieces. So how can you actually ensure that you stay connected and that information stays flowing through to not just your colleagues, but managers and your caseload and your job seekers and your participants. And I know we talked about that last week or the week before actually, with the job seeker portal session, and how that really helps with staying connected remotely and digitally.
Yep.
That is going to be really important. We've just got a question through from Tracy. Tracy just started with a new company, so finding it hard to get to know clients over the phone. And that's a really good point. There's a lot of people that would be starting new roles right now. How did you, Ben, when you started with us? How did you not just get to know your colleagues, because that's also challenging to introduce yourself and connect with people for the first time over the phone or over Zoom.
Yeah.
How did you then connect with, you know, the companies that you were trying to engage?
I think a lot of it is about taking time, right? And also focusing on that engagement piece. So a lot of that's around reflective listening. A lot of that's around mirroring what they're saying. You know, all those things they teach you. Anybody who's done any kind of counselling, any counselling training, anything like that, a lot of it's around that reflective listening. But the real thing is that understand that you are there to engage with that individual, and with the, you know, I've done the case manager's job, right? I've been an employment consultant. I've been a business development person. These are people who are difficult to engage with face to face. They're difficult to engage with in many ways. So it's about taking the time and relaxing a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like being happy to have a small talk conversation initially. We do need to move people. We do need to, you know, to get a result. We do need to keep our eye on the prize. But time spent establishing a relationship and time spent engaging with that person is not time wasted. It's going to save you time and make you far more effective in the future.
Is there an opportunity to sort of get feedback from the job seeker, the participant, around their preferred ways to communicate? I think there's always a default that we pick up the phone, but is there an opportunity to say, you know, would you prefer to engage with me initially via SMS or via an email, or, you know, is there an opportunity to open that up for discussion?
Yeah, I think there is. I think that certainly through the job seeker portal, there are a number of mechanisms that you can interact with people. You can also, you know, push out surveys and feedback mechanisms and all those sorts of things. And I think that's really important. I think that in terms of the engagement piece, that's probably the absolute key, I'd have to say.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, we're pretty much coming to the end of today's session. I might just quickly share my screen to wrap today up if there are no other questions. Ben, thanks very much for I suppose giving us a really high level insight into your experience, and, you know, how both existing clients and potentially future customers can look at using Live to achieve some of those high or really important points that we covered off at the beginning.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
As I said, we will be providing today's recording to everyone that attended, and we will also be sending around the deck. I will be also facilitating Mr. Colin next week, and we'll have another panelist, a surprise panelist, next week. For those of you who haven't registered, jump on the website, remote control, ReadyTech remote control / employment services. And there's also recordings from all of our previous sessions there as well. Again, Ben, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I hope it was really useful, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.